Hi, I'm Dr. Denise Fleming. I'm really happy to be here today, and thank you for coming to share. We're going to talk a little bit about the status of African Americans here in America today. I have a small presentation for you, and what we're going to discuss is just where we are and what we're doing nationally here in America. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation, but we will have time to ask questions at the end as well. Hi, great. So as we start, we're going to talk about economics, we're going to talk about education, as well as health. I'm going to start with education. There's more than 4.5 million African Americans that now hold a 4-year college degree. In spite of what you may hear, we're going to actually have some factual data today. The breakdown is as follows. More than 3 million blacks in the country have a bachelor's degree. There's actually more than 1 million African Americans who both hold a 4-year college degree and a master's degree. Additional, over 100,000 blacks have a professional degree, such as a medical degree, law degree, and in addition to that, there are a doctorate degree. Over 100,000 have some type of doctorate degree, whether it's in business, whether it's in education, but some sort of doctorate degree, with a total of over 4 million African American possessing a 4-year degree and above. This is a breathtaking progress in what we've heard over the years. Let's actually look at that data in the term of sex, men and women. That's a 9% increase of black men and women, and we're talking the years 25 and older. 29% of women, 6% of men hold some type of degree. Let's look at where your state is. Let's look at California. California alone, 22.5% African American. If you want to say black, I know we have a lot of labels these days. 22.5% of the population of African Americans, 25 and older, holds some type of degree. More importantly, let's look at the bottom 10. There's a problem. West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Arkansas, Indiana. Look at those numbers. They're staggering. What the percentages is that they're not achieving education. We have a question?
Yeah. How does that relate to the number of African Americans, like in Wisconsin? They would have a large population there.
Yes, and 12% of the African Americans, but remember, 25 and older, still are trying to obtain education. We're talking higher education. That's staggering. Of their population, again, in Wisconsin, of their African American population, we're still trying to get them to obtain some type of higher degree of education. And this stats is from the U.S. Department of Education. They recently released a report, preliminary data, in 15 and 16 academic year. 334,000 degrees from 4-year education, just what we talked about. Breaking it down in the area of other ethnicities, blacks are reaching 66%, but we're comparing it with other ethnicities. We still have some ways to go, but we're not looking bad when it's talking about higher education. And we even broke it down male and female. But I want you to note where we are in males. We're still trying to reach our male population in getting higher education. We talked about higher education. I want to talk about high school diplomas now. In the year 15-16, they started something called the adjusted cohort graduation for public high school students. 84%, the highest it has ever been, was first measured. It started being measured in 10-11. Other words, more than 4 out of 5 students graduated with a regular high school diploma within 4 years. Within 4 years of starting 9th grade. Look where the African American population is. This is national numbers now. 76% of blacks that start school in the 9th grade are getting their high school diploma. We are bottom next to American Indians and Alaskan Natives. Only 76%. Now this is starting in the 9th grade, so within 4 years, getting high school diplomas. This was based on 15-16 year. They started with getting the ACGR, which is the adjusted cohort graduation rate, in the years 10-11. So this was based in 15-16, that we noted that African Americans was only graduating at a 76% nationally rate. Although African Americans are less likely than whites to receive STEM degrees in general, but note, in one area, African Americans at 2.8% are getting a degree in computer and data science. They're actually getting more degrees in computer and African American science than whites. Isn't that amazing? Now, I wonder why. 83% in California, because we're here today, I'm going to talk about California, but this map shows throughout the U.S. But in California, 83%, I don't know what's going on with our computer, it's making its own noise here, are graduating. But I want to talk about that STEM. It's because 89.3% of black households have a computer. You note that. That's why they're getting degrees more in STEM. But I'm going to take a moment here to talk about that. Even though we have 89.3% of our black households have a computer, even though we're graduating more with STEM degrees, we only have 5% of the jobs in technology. There's a problem here. If we have computers in our households, if we have degrees in computer science, how come we don't have STEM jobs? Problem. There's a problem there. Good, better, and best. Not be best, but good, better, and best. We're getting better. In some areas, we are getting better. We're going to talk business relationships. 2.6 million, the number of black-owned firms nationally in 2012, which was up from 2017. So our black business and our business relationships are getting better. The number of African-American black-owned businesses and services are up. Repair, maintenance, automotive, consumer electronics, personal and laundry services, hair, nail shops. Those things went up almost 650,000. It has increased. We are doing better. Have we gotten there? No, but we are doing better. Black-owned businesses outpace growth of non-minority-owned businesses. When we do our own businesses, when we do that, we employ, we put more jobs in the economy, we do better. However, the United States Black Chambers is spearheading the Black Wealth Project in 2020. This is very important because this is an initiative to close the wealth gap. The wealth gap for black-owned businesses is huge for African Americans. The gap is largely wide. The United States Black Chambers has partnered with over 22 other organizations geared towards building the black wealth. We have to do something to help ourselves. The new initiative plans to increase the number of homeowners by 2 million. We have to start owning our own homes. I have to add by saying this. I am a realtor. Black realtors have the worst time. It's well known within the real estate industry. And this is just a fact. Asians will buy from Asians. Hispanics will buy from Hispanics. Caucasians are more open to buy from more people. Blacks will buy from anywhere, from anybody, but largely not from African American realtors. So we have a really hard time as African American realtors getting business. We really do. And it should not be that way. I'm saying that everybody should be open to buy from any realtor you can trust. Any realtor. But it's really hard. So that's why this type of initiative is necessary. Because we shouldn't be doing our business based on race. We should be doing it based upon honesty and trust. This initiative plans to increase the number of homeowners because there's a huge gap. And we need to do something to shorten that gap. So this Black Wealth 2020 is very important. Not only is it going to do that, but look at the last line. It's going to increase the general number of African Americans banking at black banks. Do you know that black banks are one of the first to close? Because we're not putting our money in our own banks? That's important.
That's why they close.
That's why they close. The USBC, which is the United States Black Chamber, has developed the application for both iPhone and Android users to help users find black businesses in their immediate neighborhoods. According to the USBC, there are over 101,000 black businesses in applications directory. So no longer do you have to wonder, is there a black-owned business near me? You'll be able to have an app that can give you that information. Through the Black Wealth Initiative, the USBC also hopes to increase black annualized revenue. In 2014, the revenue on average for black business was $86,000. In 2015, it was $75,000. So it's growing, but it's not growing at a fast pace. So we need to do something to help our black businesses. Whether it's in medicine, whether it's in art, however, we can do it. What's happening to the population of African Americans? Well, we're projected in 2016 to be up to 74.5 million, which is almost 18% of our population. $42 million. There was 144,000 non-Hispanic blacks, which comprise. Now we have to clarify because, we're mixed with everything. So now when they ask us on applications, it's always, are you partially Hispanic? Now this is non-Hispanic blacks, which comprise 12% of the population. This number increased to 42 million according to the 2010 census. Now remember, that's the 2010 census. There hasn't been one since until when? 2020, we're getting ready to do a census again. So it's very important. I know a lot of people don't want to do it, but it's important that we complete those census. It's very important that we get that done. The black population in New York, which led all states. New York is not the biggest state. Do you guys know what the biggest state is? It's California. We're the biggest state. However, we're not biggest in population. That would be New York. Texas had the largest numeric increase African Americans in 2013. The District of Columbia had the highest percentage of blacks, 50.6%, followed by, of course, Mississippi, 38.2%. Cook County, Chicago had the largest black population of any county in 2014. Harris, Texas, which is by Houston, had the largest numeric increase in 2014. So we are gaining, but look where we're gaining. Not in one area. We're gaining throughout the U.S. What are we doing in the military? These stats are so interesting to me. Very interesting. I was in the Navy. My husband was in the Navy. We've always been counted on since way before the Tuskegee Airmen, since we could get in there, to be in the military. 2.2 million number of black military veterans in the United States in the year 2014. A lot of benefits. We've always, if we couldn't do anything else, we were loyal to our country. Today, about 1 in 5 soldiers are black. 1 in 5. The next generation, we're not going to the military anymore. Isn't that amazing? Found that astounding. We're not doing it anymore. The new generation, our millennials, Our Generation Y, X's, they're not going to the military. The share of black soldiers is still larger than the 17% of the population who are African Americans. Look at the Navy. Representation in the Navy also has slipped from 21% in 2005 compared to of its ranks were black enlisted sailors in 2005 compared with 17% today. Only 17%. It was 21. Air Force, steady for nearly 30 years. 17% of its enlisted personnel being African Americans. The Army has slipped. The Navy has slipped. The Air Force is remaining steady, but it's still only 17%. Interesting stat. Something we should be proud of. We hear so much negativity about our families. What's happening in the African American families? Well, let's look at the factual data, not fake news, factual data. Families and children. Among the households with a black householder, the percentage that contained a family in 2014, there were 9.9 million black family households. 50%, half among families with black householders, the percentage that were married couples in 2014. Half. How many of us actually hear that in the news? We always hear about single moms raising kids and deadbeat dads. The facts say that half are two-parent households. Number of black grandparents who live with their own grandchildren younger than 18 in 2014, and this number is 44% were also responsible for the care. It has been generational that we take care of our own, that we take care of our moms. I took care of my mom, that our grandparents are in our households. It's been generational. It's not normal that we usually put them in homes. We do what we can. These are traditions that we need to pass on to our kids. The one thing about the black family that we're finding out is that we're not passing on traditions. The number of traditions we have are minimum, and we have to pass those traditions on to our children. The Negro National Anthem, we don't pass it on to our kids. We don't talk about it. The thing about what we're learning about the African American families is going all the way back to slavery. We have such values, such great history, but yet we don't pass that history on to our kids. As an educator, one of the things that I like to teach our children is I tell them about slavery. But what I tell them about slavery is I tell them you have a rich history. We come from the slaves that survived. Think about the number of slaves that didn't make it when they crossed that ocean. Those people that died, the sharks actually ate more during that time. They had to change their eating habits. But those that survived, those are the rich history that our kids came from. And we need to tell our kids that they are survivors. They are the rich of the rich. But yet we don't share that with our kids. And for that, our kids are suffering from depression. They don't know their self-worth. It is our responsibility as grandparents, as mothers, as aunts, to share that with our kids. And our kids will have a better self-worth. They'll find out that they're not all about games or basketball players with chains or rappers, but they are doctors and scientists and astronauts. They are the ones that help build the railroads and the White House and great builders and went to the moon. Our kids need to know who they are, and our kids lack from not knowing who they are. They need to know the true Dr. Martin Luther King. They need to know his values and his morals and his ethics and how he stood up and what he stood for. Not just what they read in the books, but they need to know how he had to do that march And how many people stood against him? Life was not easy for him. But he stood up just the same. He was in jail in Birmingham, but he made it out. And how he died, and his legacy lives on today. They need to know the true story. They need to know about Rosa Parks on that bus. And they need to know that that bus still exists today. And what she really stood for, and not just that little paragraph in the history books. Our kids to know why she did what she did. And they too are a Rosa Parks in some way. We have to pass that legacy and those traditions on to the next generations. That will let them vote, and that will motivate them to vote. This act was signed into law on August 6, 1965, the Voters Act of 65, by President Lyndon Johnson. It outlawed the discriminatory voting practices adopted in southern states after the Civil War, including literacy tests and the prerequisite to voting. I recently was exposed to that literacy test, and I have to tell you, I couldn't pass it today. It was amazing to see that literacy test and the things that they asked our ancestors on that test. But what I was most proud of was the ones that marched to take that test and set to take it so I could vote today. I was so proud for the work that my ancestors did so I could vote. I was so proud of these three men that stood so I could vote today and what they stood for. And they need to know who these men were. The African American vote, the number of blacks who voted in 2012, and you have to remember what happened in 2012, the presidential election, in comparison to the 2008 election, about 1.7 million additional black voters reported going to the polls in 2012. 66.6% of blacks who voted in 2012 presidential election, higher than the 64.1% of the non-Hispanic whites who did so. Higher. Wonder why? This marks the first time that blacks have voted at higher rate than whites in 2012. The black voter turnout rate declined for the first time in 20 years in a presidential election, falling to 59.6% in 2016. Look at what happened in 2012, and look what happened in 2016. We can change a world. Look what the African American vote did in 2012. But in 2016, our vote declined. Whether you like it or whether you don't, that's what happened in 2016. And we have the president that we have today. Whether you like him or whether you don't, I could say that the African American vote had something to do with the presidential election in 2016. Or the lack of. A number of long-standing trends in presidential elections either reversed or stalled in 2016. I heard somebody say the lack of. It's the vote. As black voters turnout decreased, white turnout increased. And the non-white share of the U.S. electorate remained flat. Here are some key takeaways from that Census Bureau report, the data source with the most comprehensive demographic and statistical portrait. There you go. And that's what happened in 2016. So people want to know why or what happened in 2016. This is what happened. And this is what happened in 2012. When we came out to vote. When you don't vote, all kinds of things happen. When you do vote, we make a difference. Together, we can make changes. If you want to make a change, It takes a team. It does take a village. All of us, Kaepernick, all of us. When we stand together, our voices will make a nation change. But it's the vote that matters. It's the unity. It's the trust. It's the love for our nation. We have to come together, and we have to make a change. Never heard of her before. She decided that she wanted to make a change, and now we see her everywhere because we got behind her, Stacey Abrams, and we continue to get behind her. She wants to make a change. They said she couldn't do it, and look, she didn't even win, but she didn't give up. We have to make sure that we're telling the next generation who Stacey Abrams is. Inmates mark end of prison strike with push to regain their voting rights because they're standing together. They want to make a change. They want to vote. They want to make a difference. After 19 days of protests in prisons across the U.S., organizers see restoring their right to vote. They're in prison. They want to vote. We're out here, and we're not voting. Your vote, your voice. No vote, no voice. We have so many people working so hard for so many years, trying to make a change, trying to make a difference for all of us. We need to vote. The new Congress is poised to have a record number of black lawmakers, increasing from 46 to 49. That number includes 3 Republicans. It doesn't matter. We have Mia Love, Will Hurd. They're not Lisa Blunt. They're Republicans. What matters is that we're voting and we're getting in to our House and to our Senate. Look what it's made up of now. African Americans, 46 in the House. Look what's happening in our Senate. We have to vote. We can make a difference together. The movement has occurred in certain aspects for African American lives. We are changing. We are making a difference in education, in health, but financial disparity remains the same. It's hard for African Americans to catch up economically. It's very hard. There are these rags to riches stories, but wealth is not accumulated in one generation. It isn't. Wealth is accumulated mostly over several generations. This is by the president of the National Urban League, Mark Moreno. It's not a small thing, it's a big thing. It's the most difficult element of race that's never really talked about. Why is it that African Americans can't catch up? The Equality Index, for example, showed that on factors related to education, African Americans were gaining. In health, we're gaining. For civic engagement, though, voting, military service, government employment, blacks are at a near parity. Look, 99.7%. But the one thing that counts, social justice. Look what's happening. Social justice, which includes incarceration rates, equality about the law, we're only half there. This is 2019. We're still at 55.9%. Social justice, we're still being incarcerated. Black lives do matter. Social justice, we're still not there. Economics, what is often used to assess the disenfranchisement of struggling groups' progress is achieving equal standing in society. The number reveals the difficulty for African Americans as a group have in climbing the economic ladder. That's why that initiative for Black wealth is so important. It puts us on equal standard. It doesn't help us to take over a nation, but it helps us to become equal in a nation. Does it erase the disadvantage of having little or no wealth? No. But does it give us a start? Yes. Thank you. Thank you for your time. I hope that I've given you some enlightenment, but I'm definitely here to take any questions about the presentation or any questions you may have about Blacks in America. Yes.
I have a question. When you made the statement about less blacks in military,
Yes.
is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I'm a military person, so I'm going to say it's a bad thing. I think that we should be throughout the nation, in many aspects of the nation, not just military. I think it should be military, government, law. If we're not in the various branches of the nation, if we're not in the Senate or the House or police, detectives, then how do we expect to be equal? We have to be sitting at the table, making decisions at the table. So I don't think it's a good thing. Right? I think we should be everywhere. Yes, go ahead. This is discussion time. Let's talk.
My opinion, this is just my opinion.
And which is valuable to me.
And I feel that military is a start. And the person has to have the initiative to advance to better things.
Yes.
And my opinion again, I'm gonna keep on saying my opinion.
Which is valuable.
I feel that the first step as being a black person, not only black but Hispanic, everything.
All minorities.
We need to get together and build that village.
Yes.
Back to slavery, we all was in there born, and it was like a village. When I was coming up, my neighborhood was a village.
Right.
So I didn't get away with anything.
Exactly.
I thought I was, but by the time I got home,
It was told.
information was there.
Exactly.
So today, society is saying that kids can do whatever they want to. The parents don't have the right to tell them what they need to do or what they should be doing. Because I see kids just disrespecting their parents, disrespecting other people. And the law is the law. And everything is not, everybody is not perfect. But when an officer stops you or asks you a question, the young generation have nerves that want to throw their rights on them. Listen. Don't just attack the officer. The officer has the right to ask you questions. But when you throwing negativity to him, he or she is human also. And they have adrenaline.
Right.
So you can pump their adrenaline up and then bam, you have a fight going on.
You said so much. You did. You even said your own answer because you said, I so agree with everything you've said. So agree with you. And you said society, and we are society. So we make those laws. But we can't change the table. We can't change the laws if we're not at the table. We have to be at the table. One, we have to vote those laws in. Two, we have to be the people that's agreeing to those laws. So we have to be at the Senate. We have to be at the House of Representatives. So if I want to see those laws change, vote me in. And I'm just using me as an example, but I mean you, or you, or you, or you, or you. Vote those people in. that have those same values, the same morals, the same thought process as you have. So when that child or that parent or that grandparent, because it's not all just kids anymore. You see as many adults that get stopped and get shot as you see young people these days. If you want those laws changed, you have to vote those people with the same like processes as you have in those offices or in society to change those laws. So they can be changed, because they can't be changed unless we have like-minded people in the seat or at the table to change those laws. And then we have to teach those morals and those values to our kids. We have to teach them. When you get stopped, I direct a group called the African American Coalition. And because you're right about the village. And so what we told them when all this was going on with this shooting and the stop, we went back to the village concept. You're absolutely right. And we told them, you see kids being stopped, you need to pull down, don't interfere, but stop down the street or in a safe location, get out and watch. Don't interfere. Watch. Because I totally agree with you. My brother being policeman or cop or detective, whatever his position is, we told them, all policemen are not right. All of them are not right. But the majority is. The majority is. You pull over, you watch, because whether it's my child, whether it's your child, we want them to go home safely. That's the bottom line. Those kids need to get home safely. So you pull over and you watch. You don't interfere. And just make sure that somebody's child is going to get home safely, because it does take a village. It takes you, it takes me, it takes her, it takes him to ensure that those kids are going to get home safely. If a policeman or a policewoman is seeing that child, somebody's parent, somebody's aunt is watching, they're going to see that child is getting home safely. That's the second thing. The third thing is, if I've said to my son, when that policeman stops you, whether he has cause or not, you put your hand on left and right, and you keep it there. When he addresses you, you answer his question, not with tude. You answer his question to ensure that you come home to me, your mother, safely. That's all you have to do. Now, it's not your cause whether he's right or wrong. Answer his questions so you can come home safely. And then when you want to vent, you vent to me when you come home, and then we'll handle it in the appropriate processes. But that is not the process when it's one-on-one with you and him. That is not the time. So I totally agree with you. It's not going to always be the policeman's fault, or it's not going to always be that perpetrator's fault. It's not. And we're not there to say who's right or wrong. But we have to be there for the end goal. The end goal is to see that child comes home safely. You have to agree with that. Because we don't want to see another child shot and killed by anybody. We just don't. I don't. I don't know what your thought process is. I don't. And for a child to sit there and say, I got the right. No, that's not the time. It's just not the time. The time is take up the proper procedures afterwards. And I'll take this time to say this. Here in Moreno Valley, I had an incident with a policeman. I did not stop and say, I'm right and you're wrong. The end of the incident was, he said, you know what to do. I responded, you're absolutely right, I do. I left the scene. I called the police and I said, and by the way, I did not get his badge number, but I did know the time. I did know the location. I immediately went home. I called the police station and I said, the officer at this location, at this time, at this incident, I have within 24 hours, the police called me back and that policeman was brought up on charges for harassing me. And I don't think it was because of my name, but it was because he was wrong. And I don't know, what happened, but I do know that the police department did call me back and did apologize because he was wrong. Just so happened, by the way, the end of this story, He had a camera on. I didn't know he had a camera on. This policeman had a camera on with a bad attitude. He probably forgot to cut it off. I didn't know he had a camera on, but they called me back to say that they reviewed the situation because he had a camera on. They didn't have to tell me that. And he was wrong. So what happened if I had went off like a crazy person? I'm in the right, da-da-da-da-da. But I didn't. And that's what we try to tell the generations, the younger generation. You don't have to go off, especially if you know you're right. Especially if you know you're right. Yes, ma'am.
I agree with that lady back there and what you presented with us. And, excuse me, and it has to start with the family. Even if it's a one-parent family.
Yes.
Someone must be responsible for the lives of those children, even if it ends up a grandparent teaching them. I like to share an incident that happened here in Riverside when I had all of my children in the car. Their dad was driving. We were driving through the UCR campus, and we were stopped. When we stopped, and the police came up to the car, my husband had his hand on the steering wheel, both hands visible, and my heart dropped. I looked at a grown black man with a family that's putting his hand on the steering wheel and said he wanted to see your driver's license. And he asked, is it okay if I reach for my driver's license? I watched him do that, and I said, we still have not made it yet. And I cried in my heart to see a grown man had to humble himself because a white cop, policeman, stopped him, and he said, may I reach for my driver's license? That's a precaution for your life, because he might think you're reaching for a gun. And we have to teach it at home. You're not going to find it in school. We got to sit down and have some moments with our children.
Yes.
Where we teach them how they are to behave and how they need to act and how they need to restrain getting emotional. It's still prevalent today. People, they just assume the worst. And so the family is important. And mothers are doing a good job. Fathers are grandmothers, but fathers need to step up to the plate and lead the family. They really do. You have made a child that makes you a father, but to really be a father, you need to help and seed into that child's life values.
That's true. That's true. Yes, ma'am.
How are our children doing in the educational system here in Moreno Valley?
Wonderful question, and thank you for asking. So our kids are graduating at an astounding rate. Our kids are graduating over 90% in our schools. However, saying that, their test scores, their standard test scores are very low. I can name a high school in particular that I'm very concerned about. Now, what does that mean? Our kids are graduating, but our standardized test scores are low, which means they are not doing good on the national state test. So I was sitting in what's called a LCAP, Local Control Accountability meeting last week, I believe it was, and we addressed that. They've changed the accountability principles, which means that now they're being scored on colors. The best score, where we had ABCDs, they have colors. They have blue, green, orange, red being the lowest. And on math, our kids are scoring, African Americans are scoring red. And on English, they're scoring red. So I was very concerned. And what they told me, if you're just giving a book test or something of sort, they're scoring fine. But when you do the national test overall, compared to the other states, they're not doing so well. That's where you have to, where we had, my generation, you had to do the little bubbles, the little bubbles. And so they gave us an example of some of the tests. It was asinine. It was ridiculous, some of the questions. No longer are the tests, I'm trying to think of an example. In the math tests, our test would be, average test would be 3 1/4 plus 7 3/5 equal, etc. Their test would be, an average test would be, Jane had 7 apples on a train going to Washington. When she arrived at Washington, she had 2 apples because she gave 3 apples to John. John ate 1 apple. How come, why do you think she only had 2 apples? And in what time frame? Something like that. So notice, the answer would not have been a math problem. It said, why do you think? That's the kind of questions they're getting on these tests. So there's many reasons why their test scores are not coming up to standards. The way they explained it to us, my response is double-fold. One, I agree, it is complicated. The questions are complicated. But my follow-up is this. If the other kids are getting it, then our kids can get it. So there's some work that we need to do. Yes.
Because I'm finding a lot of parents are having a problem with their kids graduating, getting a diploma, trying to go to a college or a university, and they're having to take all these remedial classes.
I agree.
Reading, math, and English. Because even though they may have gotten an A or a B at the local school level, when they go on, it's not the same thing.
Isn't there?
And you have gate kids. My daughter was a RA. And suicide rates were very high because these are kids who had A's, they get to college, and now they're getting lower grades, and they're not understanding. It had nothing to do with them. It had to do with the school system they were
because they're now being graded on a larger scale. So in my local community, I'm smart, and when I get to a global scale, I'm competing on a wider scale, and I find that I'm not as smart as I thought I was. And you're absolutely right. So that's being challenged in one, we're putting our kids in summer school to get them more familiarized with the college environment. And that's so many answers to what you said. One, we are putting our kids in the summer environment, and I would recommend that to any parent. Please put your kid in the summer enrollment for college, because you want your kids to have the familiarity with the college environment. We're so protective of our kids, as we should be, but they need to have that summer environment. They need to have that college familiarity, getting around the campus. The campuses are huge. We're going from, a few hundred students to thousands of students. They need to have that, so it gives them an advantage. But two, you're absolutely right. Nothing's wrong with going to the remedial courses. It gives an affirmation of this is what I know. I'm not skipping this whole summer program. I know this, and now I'm going to the next level. So it gives them some remedial affirmation, and then they can move on. But our kids should be prepared. They should be prepared globally. The schools are looking at it. They're looking at better teaching methods. One of the things that the school that I was most concerned with, which I looked at their test scores and I was just astounded how low they were, is that they're now looking at helping the kids or mentoring the kids not at a chapter test, but at the units. So when they're finding that the kids are not passing a unit, then immediately they're helping them at the unit level versus, okay, now it's a chapter quiz. We're helping them at the unit. So they're looking at some measures, but it's too soon to say whether they're being successful. One of the other things that we're looking at, or that they're looking at, is that African American kids are not in the AP courses here. That's a problem. Why isn't the African American kids in the GATE classes, in the AP classes? We need to challenge our kids. So if our kids are not using it, they're losing it. So our kids need to be challenged. Our parents are not, the second part of it is our parents are not attending the schools. They're not going to the schools. They're not demanding more of the schools. We must go to the schools. We must go to the school board meetings. We must demand more. We must attend the parental meetings at the schools. We must find out what's happening with our kids. We cannot just let it lie because we're at work or we have late meetings. We have to be more attentive to what's happening with our kids. And I have always been an advocate for a dual immersion second language. We must insist that our kids are in those dual immersion classes. Now, I have to say that's not on the schools, that's on the parents, because dual immersion is not at every school. So our parents are saying, you know, it's not at my school, so I'm not sending my kid. Unacceptable. If you have to take an extra 10 to 15 minutes in the morning and get your kid to a school where dual immersion is, then you need to do it. You need to do it. Because when you open up your brain to that additional language, our kids are learning more and they're going to get a job. If most other countries, it's mandatory that kids are speaking a second language. So for us to sit here and say, you know, it's not important that we're speaking a second language, that's unacceptable. It is important. It is important because when you're looking at job applications now, even in our generation, they're asking, do you speak a second language? So do you know what's going to happen to the future generations? Give your child that advantage. That's my thing. And our schools now are teaching Mandarin, they're teaching Spanish, and they're teaching French. So, and you can get in the elementary schools. They're actually opening up to kindergartners and above. So for our kids not to be in those classes, to me, I do not understand. And it is a small percentage of African American kids in those classes. We need to demand that our kids are in those classes. There was another question somewhere. Yes, ma'am.
You wonder why the children are not measuring up to par. I remember, because I had 3 children, and sometimes when you have a problem child in the classroom, believe it or not, the teacher will pass that child on, and they'll leave, and they have not really learned what they were supposed to do at that level. So when it comes down to be accountable on the test, their grades are low, but they never should have been
Passed on.
Anyway. And the parents should have been involved in the children not functioning. Had an experience. My son got to the 7th grade, and I found out that he was reading at a 4th grade level. And I said, I'm up there at the PTA meetings all the time. I talk to the teachers. I am there. You need to have your child sit down and read to you and see how much he can read.
That's true.
If they have books, see the arithmetic that they're taking.
That's true.
And if you don't know it, my mother, she was 98 when she died, but she said, you know what? If you don't know this and you don't understand it, if necessary, I get you a tutor. Because I want you to be able to function. Parents are going to have to be more accountable for their children.
Yes.
That they are. It's the parents. They sit down at the table. They're there with them. Let's make it a time of learning and accountability.
That's true. And she mentioned it earlier. It is a village effort. I talked to the superintendent, who is just very open door policy right now. And so I talk to him about this all the time. It does take a cooperative effort. It is a parent. It is the district. It is community. It's all of us working together. And it is the churches. We have found out that, and this is an initiative of mine, I say it all the time to pastors, we have to preach education from the pulpit. For some reason, the family orient will listen to pastors before they listen to anything else or anyone else. If we have an initiative in our churches for education, the family unit will be more cognizant. They will pay attention. So if we can get our pastors to start preaching to the families education, we can change a nation.
But
we
that
can
goes
change a
back to
nation.
old traditions.
It goes
The
back to
church
old
used to do
tradition.
that.
The church used to do that. I totally
Everybody,
agree.
all my family down south had degrees. They might not have been able to get a job all the time with a degree, but it was understood. You're going to get a piece of paper.
I agree.
And that's not being...
It's not being taught anymore. And so let's talk about the myth that, oh, everybody's not going to college. Everybody's not going to college. And while I'm on this, I want to introduce Dr. Mildred Phillips. Thank you for being here. But you're right, and I'm going to ask you to say a few words in a minute. But you're absolutely right. So let's talk about that for a moment. Everyone says, oh, everybody's not going to be a doctor. Everybody's not going to be a lawyer. Do you know how much money electricians make, or pipe fitters, welders? They make a lot of money. I've worked with the unions. I've talked to the unions because I totally realize that. I totally realize that everybody's not going to be a doctor or a lawyer or a CEO. It's okay. But that does not mean you will not have to have a degree of some sort. Even McDonald's say that in 20 years from now, they're going to ask you if you have a bachelor's. So you still will need some sort of education. I have talked to so many people that have dropped out of school and had to just go back to get a high school diploma. You still need to have some type of education, whether you're going to be an electrician, whether you're going to be a pipe fitter, regardless, you still need to have your basic education. You have to have that. So when people say, oh, I don't need education because I'm going to be an electrician, yes, you do. You have to know that wiring when you're putting up lights. You have to know what type of wire to use. You do. So when people say, well, I don't need education, you do need education. Even if you're going to work in Nordstrom's, when you're taking off percentages of my shoes, you need to know that you're using the right percentage. You really do. You need to have basic education, regardless of what you're going to do in the future. And let's just say you're going to be the best, the fabulous mother, and never get a job in your life. That child's going to go to school. And you're going to have to know how to help that child one day. You still need education. You're going to need education regardless of what your life desires are going to be in the future. So no matter what it is, what your goals and desires are going to be, you're going to have your education. You might as well complete it now. You might as well complete it while you have the opportunity. My thing is this. As we have realized that it does take a village, we have realized that it does take a community. We can't do it by ourselves, but we have to get rid of this stigma that we're afraid of the next generation, that we're afraid to walk down the street. I have to tell you, my mom was a working parent. I came from a two-parent mixed household, but my dad was not involved. He was not engaged because he went to work early morning, came home very late. So it was put on my mom, who also worked. So I had to get up in the mornings, get my little sister off. But I remember this crossing guard, who I couldn't tell you her name today. But as a child, I would get my little sister off, and I don't know how, but this is just how it worked in the Midwest. I would get my little sister dressed and ready for school, and we'd lock the door. I guess they called it latchkey kids. We didn't have a term back in my day. So we would get my little sister off, lock the door. I would cross the street. There was this, I guess, angel of a crossing guard, and she would stop us in the morning, and she'd look at us and say, fix your hair, fix your shoes, whatever. And then we'd cross the street. And that happened daily. I couldn't tell you who she was. I just tell you that's how it happened. And when we came home, that same crossing guard would make sure, now you get in the house and make sure you get something to eat. My mother didn't know this lady. And honestly, I never even told my mother about this lady. But as an adult, I could appreciate her. Because now I remember her, and I remember the value that she added to my little sister in my life. Now, I probably never even told her thank you. But now I remember her because she was part of my village. She was a part of my village. And I'm here today standing telling you, you and I have to be part of somebody else's village. We can't no longer say, oh, this child's going to curse me out, or this mother's going to be mad at me. I was in the mall a few months ago, and there was these young kids just running through the mall, screaming in stores. I ran behind this little boy. I said, boy, if you don't stop it, what is your problem? And he challenged me. And I said, boy, I'm going to call your mom. And he actually looked at me and said, call her. Call her. You want the number? He actually did. Call her. You want the number? And that showed me right then that he knew that she didn't care. And I told him, boy, if you don't stop it, you're going to get my number. But I had to tell you, he stopped. He stopped. Because I cared enough. That's who you and I have to be these days. And you will be challenged by some of these children. But they will think about it. I actually had the same instance now I think about it, a couple days ago, because some kids on the outside of the mall asked me to buy some candy, which I still have in my purse today, because they were doing a basketball thing. So I did. I bought this candy, and I opened it up, and it was like 20 years old, because they said they were selling it for a basketball team. So come to find out, it must be a scam, because couldn't have been for a basketball team. It must have been the same candy they've been selling for 20 years, and it must have not been for a basketball team. And I thought, oh, I'll never do that again. But when I left and got in my car, and I'll get your question, I left and I got in my car, I seen him cursing out the security person that told them, you can't stand here selling this candy. And I stopped because the young man that approached me said a bad word to me as he's asking me to sell his candy and to buy his candy. And so I said, no, I'm not buying your candy. So the other young man that approached me, I said, now you explain to him why I wouldn't buy his candy. And he says, man, she's not going to buy your candy because she said a bad word. Now, I didn't tell him that, but he knew. And so I said, he's absolutely right. You don't approach someone using foul language. And so I bought the candy from the young guy that didn't. Got in my car. And before I could come down the aisle in my car, they're cursing out the security person. I stopped in my car. I said, I don't believe you guys. And then they want to justify. I said, no. What she did to you doesn't matter. It's what you're doing to them. And then they went on about their business because they knew I cared. I was a part of their village. And anyway, they were scamming because the candy was so old. It couldn't have been. But they were still scamming. But I came a part of their village. So I say all of this long rabbit hole story to say to you that we have to become part of somebody's village. Please do. Go ahead with your question.
To add to your story, I ran into a situation like that. And the dad was over in the car having the kids to do that. And I'm talking to the kid, one of them cursing. So the one that wasn't cursing, I got him with the positive attitude to get on him. But in the meantime, the one with the positive attitude, he kept looking over in the parking lot. So I looked, me and the father got eye to eye contact. And I just looked at him and just shook my head. And then he got in his car, and he came and picked him up. And the one that was doing all of the cursing, he told him to get in the front seat. And the one that had the positive attitude, he got in the back seat. And I watched him. And that father, he was like just eating the one up that was cursing. But in the same token, you know, you the dad, go get a job. You got kids out here selling. I mean, you know, what are you showing them? But that one with the positive attitude, to me, I'm like, okay, he's going to survive his negative adult attitude.
And that's what happens. That's what happens. And unfortunately, we all have to do that. We all have to do that. And whether it makes a difference in that guy's life today, it made 20 years from now, like the crossing guard did in my life today. Ms. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, you have something to add to our conversation?
Well, a lot of thoughts been passing through. I was What's your name?
Ida?
Hi. I was thinking when Ida asked the question, was military a good, like a positive or a negative impact in our society? And I was thinking for my family, because I have a strong, there's lots of family members that have retired from the military. And what I see, it's been an addition, a plus to their lives because of that retirement check and because of the health care, the TRICARE that they can benefit from for the rest of their life. And I think after age 65, there's no copay. And so that's a great thing because for a large percentage of our population, by the time we're like 60, 70 years old, we start making lots of visits to the doctor's office. We're in the hospital a lot. And so if you have TRICARE from the military, that's such a plus. You don't have the burden of having those medical bills that you would probably never be able to pay for without having that type of insurance. And also going in the military, if you want to take advantage of what you can learn, what they offer, that's a plus because I know a large percentage of people who gain education that they got in the military at no cost and outside trying to go to a college to pay for it. I have several nieces that are now nurses, and the family didn't have money to send them to school to become a nurse, and so now they're doing really good in life. So I was thinking about that. I would say the military is a plus for a lot of our, if you want to say, family members. If they have no intent to go to college, or even if they do have an intent to go to college, if you go in with a 2-year or 4-year degree, you go in making a lot more money than someone without a degree. And then I was thinking about how we can help our children. I remember growing up, no television, no playtime, Monday through Thursday. It was sitting at the kitchen table and you had to actually read. And then when you finished reading, my mother would say, okay, you know the drill. And that means who, what, why, how. And then what was the outcome? And so then we were getting critical thinking, and I didn't even know it until much later in life, because we can read and just give a gist of what we read, but then can you say what the outcome, or whoever the main character, if they had done something different, what do you think? What do you think? And when you ask that question, that too is part of critical thinking. So in my household, we were taught that kind of way, and so most of my siblings did go to college. Not saying that made them go to college, but maybe that just kind of inspired them to go. And I think we need to have more of that now. And I have a great-granddaughter who's 7 years old, and she has very high test scores, but she also has a behavior problem. So, but just that when she's with me, we're reading a book. She'll just pick up any book and just start reading. She said, can I read to you? And now sometimes she calls me on the phone. She said, I want to read to you, because that's something that we share together. And then she'll say, something about the book after she read, and I'm doing whatever I'm doing, but I'm listening to her, because that's what she wants. Kids want you to listen to them. And so she's first grade with a 3.5 reading score and 2.5 on her math. And she said, oh, I like reading better than math. And then the brother is the opposite. He likes math. But just showing them and introducing them to whoever the kids may be to something. It doesn't have to be at their grade level. And I think one of the things, I'm probably talking a lot too, I think sometimes we get concerned about, this is what a 6-year-old should be doing, this is what a 4-year. Okay, if they're 4, they're too young to start reading. And that's so far from being true. I mean, they can learn whatever we present to them to learn. If you don't present, if you wait for whatever reason, I think that puts us behind.
That's true.
I think that puts us behind. I
No.
think they're ready at the age that you're ready, or not so much that you're ready, but I think they're ready to learn when we think they're not ready to learn whatever that particular area is. Because my granddaughter at 4, help me with Thanksgiving dinner with video. She's like actually helping me with the greens and cooking bread, and right now she can cook eggs and bacon. I mean, I'm there to watch her, but sometimes kids, they go to school hungry or whatever, hungry, saying, my mama didn't cook. Okay, mama didn't cook, but can you cook some rice, eggs, and make toast? So why are kids coming to school hungry, or going to church hungry, or wherever they're going hungry? And then you may say, well, they need adult supervision. Okay, so that's one we can think about. Like how much supervision they need to put toast in a toaster.
Cabrera.
So I think encouraging our kids and spending a little bit more time. Well, I'm saying our kids, they can be the neighbor's kids. Because now I have my neighbor's daughter who doesn't look like me, but she likes to come over to my house and read. She said, my mama doesn't listen to me, and that makes me feel sad, but she's learning because I'm helping her with her reading.
Because you're part of her village.
I didn't even ask for that. She saw that my granddaughter was coming over, and she would always have a book. And so now she walks around with her book. She comes over and she said, will you listen to me read? And I go, sure. So yeah, that village thing, you just like, you kind of just end up being a part of somebody's life without, not so much planning to. But it's just amazing how we can help. And then at church, there was this one girl, and they said, oh, she's slow. She can't read. And everything her mama's not doing, it's okay. Let's see what we can do. And she brought me her 2 awards because I've been encouraging her over the last 2 years. Now she's reading at grade point level, where 2 years ago she could not read, did not know her multiplications, and now she does because we play a game and I give her some sheets to do. And she does them, so she brought me her awards. Perfect attendance, and she's reading at grade point level. I was so proud of her.
Well, thank you. That's fantastic. And so I hope that if you can take anything from what we've talked about today, is that we're not all bad. And we've made some strides. We've made some strides in a lot of areas, but we still have a ways to go. And if we work together, if we create a village and be a part of a village for someone else, a neighbor's child, or a kid that we see on the street, that just one little effort will make a world of a difference for someone else. That we can change the next generation. We can change it with a smile. We can change it by just taking a minute or 2. And that we can make a difference in education just by encouraging reading. I read, my granddaughter is in Atlanta. I'm leaving today. She was having struggling in reading. She goes to a very strenuous school. And my daughter shared with me that she was having struggling. And I was thinking, what encouraged me? I loved going to the library as I was a child. We had library cards, believe it, back then. And so mine was full on both sides because they had to stamp it in, stamp it out. And mine was full. And I wanted to find out what did my granddaughter like. I remember comic books. So I sent her a comic book. I sent her Archie and Veronica comic book because I thought that would encourage her. I'm taking her 4 books with me on the plane today as I'm leaving tonight to go see her. So give a book as a gift and not a video game. You know, that's another thing to do. Remove Vampirina and some of these other things that our kids are seeing. Give a book as a gift. Bring a child to the library. It doesn't cost a thing. We have a library in the mall. So say, hey, on Saturday, let's go to the library. And we're opening up, I understand, some other satellite locations. Become we used to call people, oh, that's Aunt so-and-so. Didn't even know them. They never had a blood relationship. That could be you. Our kids don't have grandparents like we had grandparents. They don't have blood relatives. Become a adopted grandparent for a child. That's why educational test scores are so low, because we do have those working parents. But wouldn't it be such a reprieve for those parents if they knew that they had a neighbor, someone down the street to assist with their kids, maybe an hour or 2 for a day? We could have brought those kids here today. That would have been nice, but we can do it. We can be a village. I thank you for your time today. I thank you for being here. I appreciate you. Thank you. We're done. We are done.